This time exploring the automated front line, opportunities in robotics, transforming energy, infrastructure, and manufacturing. For this, we'll invite to the stage the experts, Cindi, Bough, Managing Director at Climate Investment, Marc Campbell, CEO and co-founder of Terabase Energy, Dr. Péter Fankhauser, co-founder and CEO of ANYbotics, Marc Dassler, CEO and co-founder of Robotics. And to keep the discussion in line, I would like to invite Hans Middelthon, Managing Director Europe at Aramco Ventures. Welcome to the stage and have a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Not me. Working. Thank you very much, Jamie. Can you hear me? Oh, no, you can. Thank you very much, Jamie, for the introduction. We've got a brilliant panel here, and we're going to talk about and discuss robotics impact on industries, maybe even impact on society. I will let all four of you introduce yourselves, and then we'll have a few direct discussions, a bit of a debate, and maybe, if time permits, also open up for Q&A at the end. So maybe we'll start with you, Cindi, if you make a brief introduction.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having us here. Really excited about this topic. My name is Cindi, Bough. I'm Managing Director at Climate Investment. We are an investment firm that invests both venture capital and growth equity stages. And we invest globally, and we care very deeply about greenhouse gas emissions reductions for our portfolio companies and delivering value to our LPs. We have some great energy corporate
Hello.
LPs.
Yeah, good. It's warm in there.
It's warm.
It's really warm in there, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, someone I think is cutting into the sound.
Yeah, no, there's a good amount of people.
It's a robot.
I'm going to step out and get some water. And
That's the
yeah, good. How are you?
the robot.
If someone can make sure that
good.
that mic is turned off.
Don't jinx it. Let's get to the end of the day.
So I think that mic is still on. Can please someone make sure it's turned off? Excuse me? The mic, someone else's mic is still on. Let's carry on.
Okay, so I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Matt.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Marc Campbell, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Terabase Energy. So Terabase has an integrated platform, so we're using software, AI, and robotics to design, build, and operate solar power plants. So we're spending a lot of time in the world of physical robotics. How do you use robots and software together to do construction, and increasingly use physical AI to do that. And there's a short video playing which shows how we approach the subject of automating construction, and that's with a mobile factory that we call TerraFab. So the concept is on a giant solar farm that's gigawatts in size, you deploy these mobile factories that's set up in 4 hours, and you use robots to basically do tasks that are done by humans today. So here you see the panels being installed, the panels being fixed on the steel structure, being cabled together into a completely automated system. This video is from our second generation system, which is shipping starting next month. And this system can install 1 megawatt in 8 hours. And it's really been fascinating because we've thought a lot about, in the real world, how do you actually do robotics outside? It's a non-trivial challenge, as it turns out, when we leave the comfort of a factory and go out into the mud. And yeah, we're automating different things. This is an example of a autonomous delivery vehicle. This test was done last week, and so although there's a safety driver that's completely autonomous, so you imagine an AGV from a warehouse. This is an outdoor AGV to move structures that are 2 tons in size. So a lot of cool technology. And then finally, this is showing some physical AI. So this is using an AI model to do millimeter precision tasks of fixing structures to the foundation posts. And again, this has been really interesting to see how fast the technology is going and how you might deploy it on a real construction site. So, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Péter?
Good afternoon. My name is Péter Fankhauser. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ANYbotics. And what we build is industrial inspection solutions based on autonomous mobile robots. So autonomous mobile robots with 4 legs, because you need to move in the industry where it's often confined spaces, being able to climb stairs. The robots are fully autonomous. You install them once and they can do the task over and over. And then we pack the robots full with sensors, visual, thermography, acoustics, gas detection, and all of that data is then collected, processed with AI through user interfaces, fleet management. So we do the full stack, the robot autonomy, and the interfaces, and with that provide our customers higher uptime, less risk for people, reduced to hazardous situation, and overall just better insights into their assets.
Thank you, Peter. And last but not least, Marc.
Yeah, Marc, CEO, co-founder of ANYbotics. We do the software which runs on various robots and drones, because we believe that if you want to operate in critical infrastructure, you need to have more than one robot capability available. So therefore, we combine different robots and drones into one platform, which allows you to get the 360 view for any offshore rig or refinery, power plant, etc. And to make that really easy, we put a lot of AI on top of it to really have that natural interaction with the robots and drones in production. Means you can talk to the system, tell them what to do, and it's going to give you feedback immediately, and also helps you to do data deep dives in real world. Means if I'm missing a data point, I can just talk to the system, the robot getting deployed, collect the data, and bring it back, so that you always have up-to-date information layer on top of your existing infrastructure. And therefore, our system is cross-hardware, it means hardware agnostic, allows us to deploy in every part of the world, where depending on the hardware availability, you can choose the robot. And at the end, we extract that relevant information out of the whole data and make that again visible for the customer, so that the customer can decide what to take the next action, refill oil, send somebody out to fix something, and make that as easy as possible, because we believe the technology must be as simple as, and probably everybody has it, like a vacuum cleaner robot at home. And no one wants to spend hours and hours or days to get the robots to do what they need to do. And that's why ANYbotics come into place to organize and orchestrate all the tasks.
Thank you very much, Marc. So here, as you can see, we've got a very good blend of investors, hardware and software suppliers of new robotics technologies. We're going to dive a bit into a few specific questions, then have a debate, and hopefully, as I said, have some time for Q&A. I'll start with you, Matt. Will robots take over the world?
Big question. Will robots take the world? It's an interesting one. I've been thinking about this one recently. And the short answer, I would say, is no. The robots are not going to take the world. But the long answer is kind of complex. So the way I think about it, I think about 3 categories of topics. The first is technical. Can the robot do what the person does? The second is economic. Does it make economic sense for the robot to do the thing? Third is social. Do we want the robot to do the thing? And if I go deeper on the technical, I'm actually writing a blog post about this right now, because I was thinking too much about it, which is in AI, we have all these exams to test how the AI is doing. You know, and like the one I like is the humanities last exam, where it's a list of really, really hard questions. And you say, at that point, AI is beat the humans, right? So I think for robotics, we need something similar. So I'm writing this humanities last physical exam. And the human body is an amazing thing. And if you look at, okay, a robot should be able to fix a high voltage power line in a rainstorm. A robot should be able to thread a needle. A robot should be able to paint on a grain of rice, right? So if you think about all these things that humans do, which we may take for granted, it's really, really hard for a robot to do it. And even though we see all these funny YouTube videos of martial arts and backflips, the robot can't even fold laundry. You know, how is it going to change a tire on a car in a thunderstorm? So I think there's a long way to go from a technical standpoint, and I don't know that AI solves that. The AI brain will give it a lot more capability, but the dexterity of the hand is extremely difficult to match. And sorry, it's a long-winded answer. But the second one is economic. My friend had a company that used robots to pick strawberries, the best in the world. They picked 1 billion strawberries. It worked really well. And it could not compete with the price of expensive labor in California. The robot was more expensive, right? And I think people are underestimating that it may be economically more beneficial to have people do it, because humanoids will be expensive, especially the fine motor humanoid is going to be really expensive, at least for a long time. And so that may make a lot of applications infeasible. And then third, I would say, is social. I saw this talk last week by Sam Altman in San Francisco, and he made a comment that he had recently visited a coffee shop where a robot serves you coffee, and he hated the experience. And if Sam Altman doesn't want the robot giving him his latte, then I don't think a lot of people want that. He's like, I miss the barista, right? So I think there's a human element to a lot of jobs that I don't think is going to go away for a long, long time.
Thank you very much, Matt. I think just to build on that, Peter, Matt touched on it, but how do you see the limitations to robotics going forward?
Yeah. So today, I would say robots are more like an assistant. You tell them, also our system, exactly what you want them to do, and they can repeat it very precisely. But right now, robots don't understand the bigger context, right? They're not good in decision-making and critical decisions. So instead of trying to replicate what humans do, right, it's really a mixed workforce that we need to think of. Robots are good to be sent into dangerous environments, remote facilities, all the capabilities and sensing we don't have. But at the same time, human creativity, contextual understanding, social aspects included, all those topics is delivered to human, right? We'll have to look at robots as a tool, as a human workforce amplifier. In the future, a operator will not only operate on site, but he will have a fleet of robots in a similar way as we have AI agents for developers. So multiplying their efforts such that people can focus on the more critical tasks that require human intuition, creativity, accountability for decision making, and robots deliver the data and can do some of the manual, repetitive, and dangerous tasks.
Thank you, Peter. It looks like we have some future ahead of us still, so that's good to hear. Cindi, just on the investment side, and I'm from the investment community as well, are we in a bubble in robotics? Is it everyone wants to get involved and invest? How do you view the current landscape?
So maybe I'll step back, and when we look at sort of themes and investment themes on where should we be focusing, we look at the kind of 3 T's, right? Team, tech, and TAM, which is the total addressable market. And so your question is sort of on that third piece, the TAM side. Is this the market timing to invest now? And is it an inevitable thesis? And are we going to be able to make money in that time frame? And so I kind of look at it from a historical perspective. We were just talking about this before in the panel. Hey, when was the first robot? Was that going to be 1920s? Was it 1940s? Did it come around the Industrial Revolution? And I think sort of the first sort of genesis of automata, it was called, is in General Motors was coming up with sort of robotics that were slightly automated. But that wasn't the time to invest in robotics, right? It was, people were very manual, but it's interesting because robotics is not a new theme, right? But it is a very interesting theme today. And you're saying, is it hyped? I think it's a very interesting time, but it is just now when you're seeing the blending between AI and the hardware, the software and the hardware piece of it today, where the growth and the speed of development of the brains and the smarts associated with not just the piece of hardware, but the entire operational system, and that blending of softwares between the industrial operations as well as the hardware systems, and the brain that marries it all together to make it work. I think this is now actually the time to be investing, and I don't think it's hyped. I would also sort of reference, as investors, we look about when we enter, when will we exit and how will we exit? And I would sort of mention that there's been a lot of activity from large corporations. I mean, some people may know that SoftBank recently paid almost $6 billion for ABB's robotics. But that was just within the last 6 months. But then there is also, there's a major robotic manufacturer named KUKA, a European kind of automated arm, massive arm in manufacturing and operations. They were recently bought in 2017 by Midea, and that was almost I think it was over $4 billion, 3.7 billion euros. So there has been lots of acquisitions that are significant. And then furthermore, we've seen Amazon in the last 2 months buy 2 more robotics startup companies, and they are going very heavily in it. So I think so as investors, we think about, is there an opportunity to invest, to scale the company, to make a big impact, but then also to exit? So I think that you're seeing that there is a large trajectory towards the ability to invest today and still make money tomorrow in an area that is actually very important. And to Matt's point, like, it's not like robots are taking over the world completely. We still have a long way to go, so I think that's why we're still super bullish.
Good opportunity. And I guess, Mark, where do you think Europe fits into this picture? There's a lot happening in China, we know, and the US. Europe is often seen as a poor cousin. But where do you think we fit in?
I think that's a good answer. Yes, we are on the opposite of the pool position. I mean, literally, China is producing so many robots, so many humanoid robots, and an output what they do in 1 month did the whole West more or less did in the whole history of developing humanoid robots. So there is a huge pressure which coming from China, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a good place in Europe for actually being successful in that space as well. And I think the main driver here is that we have the real need. So I'm German. We are the oldest population in Europe. By the year 2035, we're going to have lost 7 million people in the workforce, not to cancer or whatever, but just retiring. So we're losing about 15-20% of workforce naturally to retirement age. If we all want to live in Europe, because it holds up across Europe, we need to make sure that we get automation where it's needed. And that means we need to automate our infrastructure. That's what we all do over here in terms of enabling us to keep on living in that piece of planet, right? So there's a good chance, because of the outside pressure we have, that we need and act on this. And the other part is obviously that the world has changed. We are not best friends anymore with the US. We're not best friends with China. But we still need to have those technologies over here, and that's why it's so important to have Péter with his company to build robots which we can actually use in critical infrastructure in Europe. So many of our customers are asking us exactly on this. Can you deliver hardware? Can you deliver software which comes from Europe? Because this is what we need to trust our dearest technology, right? So we have the outside function which says we need more automation. We have the capabilities also to build that, because, I mean, look at Europe. I mean, the whole industrial unit of just on Germany is amazing on developing really key technology and build things. This is what we did, and that's what whole Europe did most of the time, except of, let's say, other countries which have beautiful places like Spain, which are not so strong in production, but it doesn't change that we have those capabilities and we can make it of use. The question is whether do we have the political will to execute on this? And I think, I mean, we all here for energy transition. The flip-flopping of the industry, like politics, in terms of do we go to the transition, we don't. I mean, Germany is a bright example of that. Is really not helping to find a straight path forward. So, in terms of can we? Yes. Will we? Probably also yes. But do we have the right economic and political environment to do that? And that's usually political will, and at the end, money, as always.
Thank you, Matt. We all, I mean, everyone in the room, I hope, is supporting the European effort here. We need it, as you say. We have an aging population. There's resilience questions and all of that coming up. Moving into a bit more of a debate on the panel. Over to you, actually, again, Cindi. We talked a bit about investing, and again, can you give us a bit more insight in your investment thesis? You have 2 portfolio companies here.
That's right.
On the panel. Can you give us some thoughts about your thesis, maybe what you see in these 2 companies, and everyone else, if you want to pitch in, feel free. But yeah, over to you.
So macro thesis, I sort of talked about, as we think about investing, is it an inevitable trend? And is the timing now where you're going to hit the J curve? And so there's 3 macro trends that we believe mean that industrial robots and automation and AI is now for the critical infrastructure business. So one is, from an industrial operations perspective, there's a very tight operational budget, and everyone is looking for savings. The operational savings. Second is, Marc mentioned it, it's an aging workforce, and so 50% of the oil and gas operations are going to mature out in the next 10 years. Similar in the power industry, folks are over 45. And the infrastructure itself is aging, right? So a lot of the infrastructure on the power and utility side is quite old, so thus needs a lot of inspection and a lot of maintenance. And then the third piece is, the human factor. I mean, Matt mentioned the social aspect of wanting to have a human touch, but the other factor that we think about humans is it safe, right? Is this operations where you're looking at critical infrastructure? You could get electrocuted, right? You could be in a gas leakage where there's a massive fire. It could be really dangerous. So there are constrained environments where it is too dangerous or actually inaccessible for humans to do that. So, as you mentioned, we invested at Climate Investment in both ANYbotics and ANYbotics. Super proud of both companies. And they both exemplify sort of this macro trend of things, where essentially operators of critical infrastructure in utility market, chemicals market, oil and gas market, et cetera, are saying, we do inspections millions of times a day for the meters, for gas leak detections, for SF6, et cetera. There's all these different types of necessities to make sure the operations run smoothly, and we need to make sure that our operations don't have downtime. Downtime kills us, right? And so by doing regular operations and maintenance and regular inspections, it's been a critical part of operations and a significant piece of the budget. But as we're looking to try to deliver greater profitability for these operations, and you're delivering safer places, and your aging workforce is aging out, we need to be thinking about, can we use robotics and automation, whether it's a rolling robot, whether it has 2 legs, 4 legs, whether it's flying. I think all robots will be needed because it's still today a very bespoke. So one of the things from a thesis perspective is that there's not one robot that's going to fix everything. It's definitely not going to be humanoid, right? There may be humanoids that do sort of more house applications, but from the industrial perspective, there's going to be still different types of robots for different type of specific use cases. And because of that, we believe that the ability to have both robots and software that can operate in very difficult environments. So both ANYbotics and ANYbotics are working on ATEX certification, ATEX certified robots. These are the Div 1, class 1, Div 1 difficult situations. It's really hard to get the certifications, because essentially, if a robot falls off and it blows up, it'll cause a major gas leakage right across the operation. So that's the thesis that we had, and then we kind of thought about the trajectory, like, is this the time today? Because, and for sure, I mean, some people know it's very public that BP in 2025 declared we need to save $1.5 billion in operating expenses. So the pressure is there for the industry. I mean, maybe not as much at this current exact moment since the Strait of Hormuz, but the longer term thinking over the next 10, 20 years, it is something that we need.
Thank you, Cindi. I think just as a sidetrack slightly, Péter, I think a lot of people have seen the Boston Dynamics dog, which is yellow. You showed your red one. And building on what Cindi said, you need different robots for different applications. Can you very briefly explain the difference between what you have and the yellow one everyone has seen wandering around in various places?
Yes. So we designed, through our focus from the beginning on industrial work, so a situation the robot is continuously exposed to harsh environments, offshore, wind, dust, high temperatures, low temperatures, all of these topics. So it's an industrial grade unit in terms of IP67, water and dust proofness, these kind of topics. And what Cindi alluded to is the certification for explosive atmospheres. Now, in oil and gas, you're not allowed to bring any device, even a mobile phone, that could cause an explosion, because you have to assume there's explosive gases in the air. Now, this is similar. You're not allowed to smoke at the gas station, right? But, I mean, much more strict than that. It is actually very difficult to achieve for a robot that has a big battery, 15 motors, electronics, all of that, and it needs to be lightweight to be able to climb stairs. So this is where we can also lead the way. We have now dozens of patents on the systems compared to China, where it's cheap robots, volume manufactured, and in Europe we can lead with high quality, high certification efforts.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good clarification. A bit on the geography again, Matt. I mean, how do you see it evolve in the US? It's good to get that perspective for us Europeans. How's the industry evolving? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the U.S. there's huge interest in the application of robots, both the construction and maintenance, kind of generically speaking, for the same reasons, labor shortages that we see and the rising cost of labor. And also I would echo kind of the dangerous environments, right? A lot of these inspections or construction activities are quite hazardous. So we see a lot of interest. I think on the O&M front, it's becoming more real. So things like robotic, like in the case of solar, where I'm coming from, using robots to clean the panels or cut the grass, which are the two biggest O&M costs in a solar field, and the rest of it's kind of easy. And when you don't do that properly, you have things like fires. And so, insurers have lost tens of millions of dollars from, poor maintenance of the facilities. So I think that robotics is important. And then on the construction side, it's really early stage. Kind of to Cindy's point about timing, when is the right time? But I would say that with the advent of the AI brain, we can now think about the application of robots into construction, which is a really, as I was saying earlier, really, really hard challenge. But the AI completely changes it to a large extent and opens up things that we couldn't do before. So yeah, I think the interest is there. I think we're seeing pilots, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Building on the AI, the physical AI, then, Peter, how do you see that evolve?
All right, big topic. Ultimately, physical AI has democratized how we can program robots. My PhD was still in programming, the mathematics behind it, and very few companies had the background to be able to do that, and it costs a lot of money. And now through deep reinforcement learning, and we have been pioneering this since 2020, the robots learn themselves. It's not only easier, but it's much more reliable and performant. So we're squeezing much more out of the hardware. Now, there's several benefits to that. I mean, safety, reliability, but also you can start using cheaper components on your hardware because AI can compensate for it. So this is AI eating to the cost of hardware. Mm-hmm. And so right now we're using it in mobility, autonomy, and eventually, the world models, etc., the robot, to build it contextual understanding. And this is the robot going from an assistant, where you tell it exactly what to do, to be a proactive agent, right? So imagine a robot has seen thousands of facilities, has stored that, learned on how to do these inspections, and it will be an expert walking around and telling you, look, I know these assets, I know the failure cases with other customers, here's a proactive maintenance and inspection and maintenance approach. So that's a very exciting field, how physical AI has a massive impact how we program machines. But at the same time, right, I don't think the best robot or the best model will make companies successful. Adoption still happens when you have that end-to-end solution, understanding of the problem, and guide the customers on how to use the solution. Now, funny enough, many of our customers actually, they want robots, but they don't understand exactly the problem it's supposed to solve. So that's where we're heavily leaning in the consultative sales approach, pre-PO, post-PO, and this is not just a product that you ship and off you go. It's a bigger project, and this is how you go from a few pilots to actually scaling successfully.
Thank you, Peter. Just on the adoption rate in general for all of you, it's at least the companies we've been involved in, adoption is always a challenge. It takes longer, it's harder, there are delays. I don't know, do any of you have experiences in struggling with that, overcoming it? Where are you on that journey? And maybe you can start, Marc.
I mean, that's the key to success. I mean, I said that in the beginning, that we try to make it as easy as possible so that you can foster the adoption. If you put in barriers because an expert needs to do something to get the robot moving, then you're immediately losing the interest of those people which need to operate it. So the classical approach that the CEO says, we're going to do robotics now, and we do automation, and now here is the company which you do that usually not works. You need to have the minds and the hearts of the people which are on the ground saying, I love that robot because it takes away one of the pain points I had. For example, running out on middle of the night on the rainy weather and look at the pump, the motor, pipes or whatever. The robot is doing that now, and people sit in their, let's say, in the operations center and having a coffee and watching, supervising the robots. So the key is to make it as simple and as trustful for the people which have that tool in their hands. And that's the way how you scale, because there's so many veto powers in oil and gas, especially. There's safety, there's legal, there's data, keeping data safe. There's so many things which can fail. And therefore, you need to make sure that you have drivers in the company which say, but it's amazing, let's move that. There might be a mistake, problem, but we're going to fix that. We're going to move forward in that. And only if you now, as a company, start on learning this as a, let's say, a user of robots, you will be able to roll that out globally at a certain point in time. If you don't have enough expertise developed within the organization to trust and say, okay, we did that was work, that was good, this was not good, only that allows you to really to accelerate and get the robots out of the door. So when it's coming with, is it the right timing? Yes, the timing to start automating, because this gives you then the competitive advantage which other companies don't have then. Because if they then start late, then you're late to the table, and the other one reducing their OPEX massively because they're using robots. That's a game.
And Matt, you operate, and maybe Peter as well, both in the US and Europe. Do you see a difference between the customer uptake in the two regions?
I think the interest level is the same, and I think the openness to adoption is similar. You know, we've worked with European energy companies that are really pushing aggressively. People like EDP or NL or others that really want to catalyze like sort of the outdoor construction and operations robotics. So yeah, I think it's a similar situation. I think the challenges are the same. Labor, cost, etc., and need to be more competitive. So no, I think there's really open-minded here. Yeah.
Maybe I would add something, if that's okay, Hans.
Yeah.
From a geography perspective, we're seeing the challenges are the same and sort of the adoption interest is the same, right? Whether it's Middle East, whether it's US, whether it's Europe. I think there are some differences whereby Europe has more strictness around data privacy, and understanding and making sure that the solutions that they're implementing have the correct sort of, GDPR compliant, et cetera. But I'd also say, like, from an adoption, we're talking about adoption in general, like, I think the robotics adoption challenge is quite interesting because first there's like a business unit that needs, and then there's maybe a CEO. I think about it like a zipper, right? Like there's the CEO to CEO, there's the business unit side of it, then there's possibly the CIO, right? So there's data and infrastructure and IT side of things. Then there's the robotics group that most companies have. They have a robotics group and they have to test out the robotics and figure out which robotics is the right one, and blah, 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 blah. And then, you look at the budget associated with that, and companies have it sometimes siloed, and they don't talk to each other, right? So maybe you could do really well in a pilot with the R&D group, but you don't actually get to talk to the operators. Alternatively, you could get to talk to the operators, they love it, but then the robotics or the IT people put up a blocker and say, hold on, I haven't done this and made sure this is connecting into my SAP, et cetera. So I think commercialization and really scaling within an organization depends on the organization of whether those operations are very tightly integrated and centralized. Like a centralized IT system actually really helps, right? It really helps proliferate and scale across geographies. But if everything is relatively siloed by an operation, and basically they say, my operation, that's my budget, I make the decisions, and then they need to get approvals from all these different kind of outsiders, it takes a long time. So that, I think it's a case-by-case basis in terms of the organizations, but it's something that I noticed that in the robotics and AI and scale-up phase, it's just, there's lots of interested parties. And I think all these interested parties want to have a say. So when corporations are set up in a way that says, this is like the big mission of what we want to do, and all the people below it are sort of in line, that's when you see things scale quickly.
Thank you, Cindi. Just on that, you're talking about collaboration internally in corporates. But back to you, Marc, again. In terms of collaboration between humans and robots, how is that going to work?
Building on what I said, it's about that the people which are operating that, they need to have that trust, and they need to feel that is adding value to their daily operations. And this is why it is so important to really get their hearts and minds behind it. And what we want at the end is not that the human is replaced by the robot. Humans should use the robot as a tool to make their life, their work easier, so that they can focus on much more complex tasks. So where we're usually operating in is exactly that you have the so-called, in our industry, it's called dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks, right? These are the tasks you don't want to do as humans, and that's exactly where the robot comes in and can solve the problem. But what you want is, you want to have trustful robots, and that's why also the use of AI within robotics is, let's say, you need to be careful where you're going with that, because in our case, if everybody knows that, right? ChatGPT has hallucination issues. Probably all the large language models have that. You don't want to have that in a robot in oil and gas who's hallucinating a catastrophic chemical or gas issue, right? That might be shutting down your operations. Millions of dollars goes away, right? So therefore, you need to build that trust and that capability in there, and therefore having the human as the supervisor, as the decision maker, which sits on top, is key. So we will not get the human factor out of this game. We will always need to have them in there. Yeah? As this is why we can trust, because humans talk to another and build that trust, and everything else is a tool, and that has limitations, as we know.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's clear. I think there was, Cindi, you mentioned a bit about budgets. One topic that I know there are many investors around here that we often talk about in Europe to fund startups like this is the lack of capital in Europe, and we need to get it in from the US to supplement or provide growth capital, bigger volumes. How do you see it in robotics and what you see in general? Is the European capital market ready to back these kind of companies that often need a fair bit of capital to reach maturity?
Well, I think there could be some innovation on the financial side to be able to deliver sort of working capital for actual construction of the hardware, right? Hardware construction, it's, you get it, if a lot of equity being used to build manufacturing of robots, of hardware, is just not it's very, very expensive capital, right? I would say European capital venture versus growth equity as a broader topic is interesting. One, we're a global investor, so we think about it, let's find the global winner from a technology perspective and then scale it up. We're not gonna have a US bet because we're in the US and a European bet because we're in the European. We find the global winner from a technology perspective. And what's interesting is there's actually a lot of interesting technology coming out of Europe, which is usually it's Silicon Valley leading on these things, but we're seeing a lot of robotics. There's great universities focused on robotics here, and so a lot of the innovation, I mean, River, I think is how you say it, is a Swiss company, right? Mm-hmm. This is a Swiss company, German company right here. So I think there's a lot of innovation coming out of Europe, and so I'm seeing a lot of capital who is global capital or US allocators coming over to Europe for this specific topic, which is exciting.
Yeah, no, very good, very good. We have, I think, 1 minute left. Does anyone have a burning question they would like to ask any of the panelists? No? Any further comments from any of the panelists before we round up? All happy?
I mean, coming back to, because there's a lot of investors, right? This is important for us as startups, is to exactly point on this. There needs to be more money in Europe to go into that. I just looked it up before. The amount of investment of the city of Singapore in robotics and AI in the last 2 years was $1 billion US. That's the city of Singapore. Yeah? And if you go to China, it's like they're investing like 20 billion in AI and robotics. US is also strong on financing. But we need more, let's say, venture capital in that sector because, as you said, we have great talents. Yeah? We have also the manufacturing capabilities over here. It is the willingness of going into that risk. And I try to tell everyone it's worth it because simply around, we can just look around, and this is a very diverse group and a lot of young people. Normally, when I'm talking, there's a lot of baby boomers in the room, and you just look left and right and understand, okay, in the next 5 years, you're not part of the workforce anymore. And somebody need to replace it, otherwise you switch on the light and there's nothing coming. Yeah.
No, thank you very much on that closing note, and thank you to the panel for attending. Thank you.
Thank you.